Hello everyone and welcome back. Wisteria here, and thank you if you're listening on the podcast or YouTube. Either way, doesn't matter. So next we have the death of Dick Spot. All of Oswestry was alive with the news. Dick Spot was dead. Ever since he had first come to Oswestry, stories swirling around him like his cloak, he had been a man of marvels, mystery, and magic. Dick Spot was the Conjurer, the Cunning Man. He saw the web of destiny shimmering around each person and saw what their lives would bring. His spirit flew over land and sea to view the fate of ships travelling the oceans. He could find anything that was lost, from a brooch fallen into a fireplace to a maiden drowned in a pool. He could bind horses and men to the spot and make them dance frantically to tune only they could hear. Dick was born Richard Morris in Derbyshire in 1710, or Derbyshire, depends how you pronounce it. He was marked out as different from the very, very beginning. What marked him as different was actually a black spot near his nose, giving him the nickname he carried to his grave. He was orphaned young and brought up by his aunt, Deborah Heathcote, a fortune teller. It didn't take long for Dick to learn her new skills, and soon her talents were dwarfed by his gift. Aunt Deborah did not like being eclipsed by her nephew. Soon those that came knocking at the door no longer asked for her, but for Dick. Jealous of his talent and the attention, she would pretend he was out and offer to read their fortune herself. Dick always knew, though, and somehow the customer managed to see him soon enough for his advice. At the age of 10, he was already helping to recover strayed cattle and stolen goods, and telling hopeful lovers whether their affection was returned. Dick's answers were not always what his questioners wanted to hear, but time and time again, the passage of time proved him absolutely right, generally on point. Dick's aunt died when he was 17, and he made his living as a conjurer. His knowledge was uncanny, and he soon became a wealthy man, keeping a coach and servants too. Dick was always able to make money. He knew which ventures would succeed and the outcome of any race or gamble. He did not need to see customers, but he thrived on the comings and goings, people of every degree coming to ask his aid. Clients came to Dick as a doctor as well as a fortune teller. For aches, fevers, he wrote on 3 bits of paper and told the patient to bury them secretly in a field. The other disorders, they were asked to burn the scraps of paper instead. In every case, they were told never to look at the contents of the papers, else the remedy would fail. Dick was as fascinated by mechanical workings as the workings of man and fate. In his spare time, he was always tinkering with a new mechanism or design. He invented a clock which worked for 2 years or more without being wound, winding itself by the weight of the atmosphere. Another he made out of wood for the pub, one that he owned, the White Horse, in Frankwell. It gained or lost no more than a second in a month, which, for a wooden clock, was quite an impressive feat. Some of his inventions gave vent to his macabre sense of humour. He designed a chair so that when someone sat down, an enormous skeleton leapt up from behind, clutching its arms around the unsuspecting victim, holding them fast until Dick pressed the spring on the back of the chair. When Dick came to live in Shropshire, spending his time between Shrewsbury and Oswestry, he was already famous, having had articles written about him in London and Paris. One day, Dick was enjoying a drink at the White Horse on market day. He was appreciating a sit-down and the full house of company. A group of regulars were gathered drinking together, the drink oiling their tongues and giving them a taste for some excitement. Mr. Drinkwater, the wool stapler, was there, Mr. Crump, the warehouse man, as well as a number of their friends too. "Come on, Dick," they called him over. "Give us some sport. Liven things up a bit for us, will you, man?" Dick gave them a long look. "And if I do, if, for example, I make that man outside break his pots, will you pay the damages?" he replied. The group agreed, and, cheering Dick on, called for more to drink. Outside the inn was an earthenware man. He set up a little stand by the door, and all around him were his plates, pitchers, and pots on display. Suddenly the man's eyes widened. He picked up a large stick and began waving and beating it all around him, smashing his wares to pieces. His wife joined him beside him, having first grabbed a flail from a passer-by. The people walking past stopped open-mouthed to watch what was happening, and the busy street rapidly jammed up. An undertaker carrying a coffin pushed his way through the crowd and suddenly toppled into the empty space in front of the pot seller. His feet skidded on the broken crockery beneath his feet, and he fell to the floor. The lid of the coffin flew open, and a large white cat jumped out, hissing and spitting, then caught its bearings and sped off. The potman and his wife raced after it. The company in the White Horse watched with mouths gaping. Drinks forgotten, rapidly sobering up, the amusement faded, replaced by fear, and they begged Dick to stop. He smiled, nodded his head, and turned away from the window. A little while later, the earthenware man and his wife came back to their stand, looking with dismay at havoc created. As soon as they were spotted, they were brought inside the alehouse and sat down. Once he had a drink in his hand, they asked the man what on earth had happened to make him break his wares. He described how he had seen a great white bear striding over to his stand, peeing all over his goods, and he tried to send it away. As he beat it back, it turned into a white cat, which he lost while chasing it. He did not know what had caused him to see such things, and now his property was ruined. The company reassured him that he was not mad or possessed, and that his losses would be repaid. He cheered up considerably when he realised that he'd made quite a profit, and made more than what he would have made on market day. So he was more cheerful even than some of the drinking party, who not only had to pay for the losses, but had been so scared by the experience that they thought the devil himself was coming for them. And so that day, Dick earned another nickname, Dick Hellfinch. One of the most common queries Dick dealt with was the fate of vessels at sea. For so many merchants and investors, their fortunes depended on what happened miles away, with weeks until news filtered through. One day, there was a loud knocking at the door. Dick sat in his study, footsteps rapidly approaching, the sound of a high-pitched woman's voice getting louder and louder. Into his room burst a woman in full complaint, and Dick's maid, trying without success to hold her back. The woman marched over to Dick, brandishing a newspaper, demanding her money back. It transpired that Dick told her some time ago that her future husband was sailing a ship's surgeon on a certain boat, and here, reported in the newspaper, was, well, news of the loss of the ship and all on board. Dick held up his hand to stem the flow of abuse, and, at last, she quietened. He gestured to a chair, and she sat to wait. Dick slowly walked around the room, his eyes focused. She watched in sullen silence, fidgeting on the chair. At last his body jerked. His eyes snapped back into focus, and he turned to the sturdy woman. "You are too rash in charging me with impositions. I have not imposed upon you, and although the ship is lost, I can tell you more than you have yet heard. All of the officers and crew are perished. All but that very William Hales, who, in spite of all impossibilities, is destined to be your husband. He was miraculously preserved by a plank, and has got to a rock. He's on it now. I've seen him almost dead with fatigue, and he will be very near famishing, absolutely famishing, before there will come any such relief. He is about 200 miles off at sea, but he'll be in Liverpool within 3 weeks. He has nothing but the clothes on his back, and will beg his way up. You will feed him, clothe him, marry him, and bury him within a year." Dick and the lady talked for a while afterwards. She apologised for her hastiness, though she was naturally disturbed by her foretold fortune. Dick consoled her with the knowledge that she would be happy with another husband after William Hales, when he died. Dick, of course, always knew when his own death would be, though he kept the knowledge close until he was near his round. He lay in his deathbed, friends and attendants gathered, everyone speaking in hushed whispers. Into the quiet came a strange rapping from behind the wainscot. "Do you hear that?" asked one of Dick's friends. "Yes," he murmured. "My time here is determined by the light of that lamp, which will go out before morning." His friends sat around his bedside, watching his breath rise and fall, looking up each time the light wavered. Finally, in the dark before dawn, the lamp guttered and died, and Dick's chest lay still. Though Dick was dead, his legacy lived on for many years. Charms were scattered throughout Shropshire and all the neighbouring countries and counties in England, Wales, protecting houses, farms, animals and people. His prophecies continued to play out as the years went by. It happened one time that a spirit was loose in the little village of Llandwyn. It was causing havoc, creating fear and mistrust, causing accidents that were no accident, and setting neighbour against neighbour as the spirit's pranks spiralled beyond control. There was nothing for it but to call Dick Spot. Some say that Dick read the spirit down, forcing it with his strong will and the Lord's word. Others say that Dick tricked the spirit through its vanity. But however it happened, Dick had an angry spirit trapped tight in the quill of a pen. To keep it from escaping, he put the quill beneath a great boulder in the river below Sinon, and swore that the spirit would be imprisoned until the river ran dry. The local people named the boulder Caregia Yprid, the ghost stone, and gave it wide berth. However, the spirit's release came sooner than anticipated. Liverpool needed water in the 1880s. It was announced that Llandwyn and the valley were to be flooded, and in the process the river diverted and the ghost stone blasted. The village inhabitants complained to the workmen and the architects, but without success. The day arrived and a hole was bored into the boulder, and the dynamite inserted. A group of local inhabitants were gathered at a distance to watch. Together with the workmen from Wales and Shropshire, who had refused to have any part in the operation, the Irish and English workers from further afield carried out with the demolition of the stone. The blast detonated, and when the smoke cleared and the dust settled, they saw a pool of water in the cavity where the stone had been. The water began to swell upwards, and the watchers stared, holding their breath. Out of the water emerged a large frog. It climbed up onto a broken shard of stone. Obviously, the ghost stone, that is. And it just sat there, rubbing its eyes with its feet, as if it was awakening from a lengthy sleep. For a long time, all the workmen stood looking at it, until at last it jumped from the rock and swam away. The reservoir was completed, and Linwood now lies submerged beneath Lake Vinwy. As for Spirit, no one knows. Perhaps it was a frog after all. Perhaps it resolved to be less troublesome after its long sentence beneath the rock. Or perhaps it's still mischievous, still malicious as ever. A bundle of trouble, free to roam the land. Nothing to contain it now. Dick Spot is only a memory. The end. So I guess that's the tale of Dick Spot. Never heard that tale before. I've heard ones like it, but different names. But definitely interesting. Please hit the like button and share if you can. If you've not yet subscribed, please consider doing so because it does really help. Thank you for listening and many blessings.